Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA show. It's the trade deadline, and that means it's Nerder, she wrote. We do this every year. I'm Dave DeFore, joined by Seth Partnow and Mo Keel, and our special guest, Andrew Schlecht from the Slam and Jam. I almost said Saturday Slam and Jam. Man,
we're just slamming and jamming on the weekdays.
Slamming and jamming. Yeah.
Guys, bigger question. Seth, you just took a big swig of coffee. How many cups of coffee has that been today?
I lost count.
That's not good.
I lost count. I lost count 5 second-round pick swaps ago.
Okay.
Pretty big trade day as far as moving parts. No huge names moving. I think most of those, we saw move earlier in the season. Obviously, James Harden already traded, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. I want to start just with the team that I think won the day, guys. The New York Knicks continue to make smart moves and set themselves up for flexibility in the future. They get Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks from Detroit, and really they only gave up Quentin Grimes. I think overall this is a great trade, especially for right now when you consider the Knicks dealing with all these, really bad injury luck. They get two guys who can come in, play immediately. You add two more ball handlers. Some positional flexibility with Bojan Bogdanovic allows you to slide him up to the four, which, of course, gets Josh Hart out of that position. And Bojan only makes $19 million next year, so you can keep him if you like him. This is a pretty good deal, I think, for the Knicks.
I think it's a great deal for the Knicks, to be honest. Like, I felt like they were a kind of a wing player away from really being contenders. Now, I don't think Bogdanovic is fully that, but adding more scoring, another a taller scorer in that sense, assuming when they're fully healthy, I think this was a great move for them. And the most important thing, again, is they kept the powder dry. Didn't include any first-round picks. I didn't feel like they lost anything major in their rotations. I didn't feel like it's a painful thing. I think when you just think of kind of the starting lineup of Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Bogdanovic, Randall, and Hartenstein, like that's a fun freaking starting lineup. I don't think it's championship level, but I mean, the way the East is looking, it's conference finals level.
I think that we're also overlooking the fact that we don't know exactly how long Julius Randle's going to be out, and especially given some of the physical ailments that are afflicting a lot of the top East teams, the Knicks are like, hey, can we get to the 2 seed? Can we, and I think that having Bogdanovic being able to play those power forward minutes while Randall and we're not exactly sure when Anunoby comes back either. I think so. It's both for like the immediate future, but also gives them a lot more juice as just a playoff rotation. And like you said, Mo, I don't think they had to give up much to do it. I like Quentin Grimes. He hasn't had a great year, and he's been hurt a little bit, and he's been supplanted by various Villanova players in their rotation, but they didn't really, when this trade was first reported, it first came out that it was Quentin Grimes for Burks, and I was like, oh wow, Detroit did something I liked, and then the other shoe dropped, and it was like, oh no, they didn't.
We'll get to Detroit. We'll get to Detroit.
I
have a lot for Detroit. Like I have a lot, so just
Detroit did a lot today. Whether it was good or not, debatable, but they did a lot.
We'll discuss.
Andrew, Bojan Bogdanovic is a guy that really, he could have fit with OKC, and OKC made a move for a similar player, but he could have fit with OKC. You see the fit with New York. I mean, I think it makes so much sense, but the bigger thing is Tibbs now has, 10, 11 guys. I mean, he played a game the other night. What was it? 6 guys he played in the second half. He's got some guys now.
Yeah, you can have a real rotation now with these guys. And they lost some scoring punch when they traded Quickly and Barrett, and they've kind of replaced that and get to keep OG Anunoby. And I feel like this is like a real team now. Like I really like what they've done, like Mo said, without trading any first round picks, because that's what we kind of expected for them. It's like they're going to get better. They're going to deal these excess first round picks that they have in order to get better. And they didn't do that. So they maintain this flexibility. They become a better team. And like what they really needed was depth. Like ask anybody on that Knicks roster, what do you need? Like somebody else that can play so that I'm not playing 40 minutes a game. That is really going to help if they can get healthy.
I would just be wary of that because I still think Tibbs will play some of those guys
Oh,
40
yeah.
minutes
Well,
a game. Anyway.
Think about
True.
how rare it is.
True.
Think about how rare it is in the NBA for a player to complain that he's playing too much. I mean, Josh Hart has been doing this for about a month now. I mean,
Yeah.
poor Fred Katz. Like, I don't know. He's gonna have to find another reason to talk to Josh Hart because Josh Hart has been telling him that he's playing too much. He hates playing the 4. I think this solves a lot of problems for them. And Tom Thibodeau loves Alec Burks so much that he now has it's almost like a comfort food. He can just say, "Hey, Alec Burks, go get me a bucket." This is a team that I think not only did they set themselves up to weather this injury storm that they're currently going through, but I think both of these guys are going to help them in the playoffs. I mean, when have we ever heard a team say, "Oh, we just have too many guys that can dribble"? Never.
Not in this league.
Maybe too many guys who like to dribble, but that's
That's
not
the
a
problem. No, you have too many guys that want to dribble.
Yeah.
That's a whole different
Mhm.
story in that
Mhm.
situation. But just the bigger picture for the Knicks is like, look, this is great for them right now. It sets them up nicely in the offseason when they want to make trades and whatnot. Like, look, Bogdanovich, if they're going to take a big swing, is a piece that they can include in some of those trades in the offseason and things like that. I think it really sets them up for the future. Like, hey, man, like, Leon Rose may not talk to the public very often or the media very much, but he's doing a hell of a job with the Knicks. And it's been a long freaking time since we could talk about the competency of the New York Knicks. And he's brought it to the organization since he's gotten there.
It's hitting singles and doubles. And we talked about this for years on this show in particular. And we talked about it with the Knicks. Constantly swinging for home runs just left them with nothing. And I think they hit 2 doubles here. I mean, this is a really good trade for them from a roster construction, from a cap space perspective, from future flexibility standpoint. I mean, it's a home run trade because they hit 2 doubles. I love it so much.
The one thing you would say, still looking at their team, and they're not the only team like this, but there is they've got a lot of guards and a lot of bigger players, and in sort of the mid-sized, it's basically OG Anunoby, and even he is he's a 3-4 or a 4-3. So that's just, like I said, everyone in the world is sort of missing that mid-sized guy. And that's I'd say where they were a little short, but those guys don't grow on trees. And, whatever we heard sort of asking prices were for the Mikal Bridges of the world was certainly not something that they were going to meet, even if Bridges was even of a Mikal Bridges, Mo.
No, I got that, but no, I had my finger up because I want to derail the podcast because it's not something I put in the rundown. But just the overvaluing of your guys over the past few years has been such a massive problem, and this can slide us into what the hell is Detroit doing? I mean, last year they were so adamant we have to have 2 first-round picks for Bogdanovich, and then this year to get no first-round picks for Bogdanovich. It's kind of like overplaying your hand. They could have gotten, I think, a first-round pick last year if they were willing to actually play ball with moving Bogdanovich, a guy that didn't fit their team whatsoever, and we all kind of knew at some point they were going to trade. I just think there was a level of that, and I think the same thing with the Nets in terms of overvaluing Bridges to a degree. And we've seen it across the board with a lot of teams at this deadline. We saw it last year. I think there's a lot of that stuff going around where teams need to kind of start being more realistic of the value of their guys and what they think they can get for them.
And I think as a way of segueing into Detroit a little bit, I think the flip side is one of their trade partners, not the trade they made with Detroit, but the trade they made with Charlotte was Utah, where they got with Toronto, where they got a first-round pick for Kelly Olynyk, but they had to include a guy they drafted in the first round last year in Ochai Agbaji. And, that might hurt a little to give up on a guy, but all right. But we're still getting a good deal because we got a first-round pick for Kelly Olynyk, and for a team in our spot, kind of the upside of the mystery box is better for us than the even if we think Agbaji is going to become like a solid rotation wing, where we are as a team, that doesn't really help us. And I think that when you talk about overvaluing your players or misvaluing players, even considering who Detroit brought in from Utah in Simone Fontecchio, I think that's sort of the situational value, the teams that understand do well, and the teams that don't.
I'll say this: the Knicks are a good example of this with Quentin Grimes, right? They made the decision now instead of, let's go and sign the contract and then try to make the trade. I think that this is just good decision making at every single level by the Knicks, and it's a nice surprise, right? Like, it's a nice change of pace. This last few years has been refreshing. Let's swing it to Detroit. I was going to save them a little bit, but I feel like we just got too much meat on this bone, and we might be there for a while. Detroit continues to be just confusing. Quentin Grimes, I think he's a good young player. He is going to take minutes away from their younger players that play the same position already.
They're not confusing. They're confused.
Yes, that stole my line. You bastard. You bastard. Now on, I'm not doing the pointing thing. I'm just going to say my line. That's it. Damn you.
It's double Dutch. Yeah. But when you look at, like, again, we've made the jokes for a couple years about having all the centers. Now they're going to get all the combo guards. There's a lot happening with Detroit. The Fontecchio deal that they made yesterday, he's a good player, but they need that pick. Like, this team should be
32nd pick in the draft.
Yeah, it's a really good pick for them, and I think that's a huge mistake. It's not a huge mistake, but it's an illustration that you don't know where you are or have any real plan to get to where you want to go. I mean, it's like some hand wavy stuff about, well, it allows us to put our guys in a good environment, yada, yada, yada.
Sure.
What environment? What environment? To not play? To sit on the bench and watch Killian Hayes play? Like, what environment are we talking about now? We're
Not anymore. Not anymore, Mo.
Hold on. And now we're going to do the same thing with Quentin Grimes playing over Marcus Saucer. Like, what environment? Like, that's the deal there. Like, they moved Killian Hayes out, and now it's just Quentin Grimes is going to get those minutes.
I mean, it's also just, you think about it, a second-year guy who has played most of his career in Europe is suddenly like your solid, your solid piece you're going to build around. I think it's a question we've gotten in a bunch of different mailbags, and I'm not sure we've ever actually answered it. Is sort of like, does it actually work when teams try to showcase a player ahead of the trade deadline? And Fontecchio is like the best example I can think of a team successfully doing that in a long, long, long time.
Yeah, and Fontecchio looked better in Utah because they knew how to use him, and they used him in a way that showcased every single good thing about his game. The Thunder have been good about this too. Like, they know how to plug role players in, like Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe has looked amazing in Oklahoma City because they know exactly what he does and they know exactly how to use him. Would Isaiah Joe look awesome everywhere else? Maybe not. With Fontecchio, is Fontecchio going to look great in Detroit? I have my doubts as to what that's going to look like because there's not a plan there. Maybe watch Kevin Knox look amazing in Utah. just become like a player because he's playing with Will Hardy. I just think that having like a clear plan of how you're going to use these guys is such a huge deal that Detroit is just not getting. And they're going to be, oh man, look what Fontecchio's doing over. Let's bring him over here. I will not be surprised if this is not a guy that's playing, the last like 10 games because he's just not that guy.
It's just it's not even the hard part about it, Andrew, with the way the season has gone with Detroit. He might not just be playing, not because whether he's that guy or not, just Monty doesn't want to play him. Like, that's kind of the way
it be.
That's sort of, you're right on about having a plan in terms of when you're trading for a guy and how you're going to use him and plug it in. Monty might just go, I don't feel like it. Like, it's I know I'm dumping on him, but like, Seth said it in one of our chats. Like, it's nice. It's good that they finally realize, like, hey man, we don't need Killian Hayes anymore. But it's sad that you wasted so many minutes on him that should have gone to your other guys that needed to develop more important players that are more important to your organization at this point. If the organization didn't know who Killian Hayes was by coming into this season, I don't know what the hell they were watching. And I think that's really one of those massive problems. Like, Detroit needs to make a turnaround. They need to start figuring out what they're doing. And I think the starting point is really just getting a handle of who the hell they are.
And part of the handle is they're bad. And that means that, like, I think our colleague James Edwards reported earlier in the year that they had a trade in place in the offseason to move Hayes out to clear up some minutes for Jaden Ivey, for Marcus Sasser, and Williams killed the trade. and because he liked the toughness or whatever. And it's just like, okay, you've got a was it 6, 7, 8-year contract. You can take some L's this year by not having that. We want to get a look at these guys. And they didn't do that. And now it's another wasted season for Detroit. And they go into the offseason. They've got guys they've got to make decisions on as far as extensions. And we don't know what Cade Cunningham is. I've been a big I've been a big fan of Cade Cunningham's potential. I don't think we still know what he looks like as a lead player. I think there's reasons to have some skepticism. We don't know they don't know what Quentin Grimes is. Will they have enough chance to evaluate this season? They're going to go into next season not knowing what Jaden Ivey is. They're going to go into the season after that not knowing what Marcus. These things are just compounding on themselves. And for the team that was as talent and asset poor as any team in the league, can we really say that at this trade deadline they've upgraded in either area?
No.
I mean, Quentin Grimes is better than Killian Hayes. So congratulations.
Yeah, but he's not better than Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic.
Yeah, he's not. So I mean, look, we can't contract the Detroit Pistons, right? Like we're kind of stuck with them. But when you look, how do they get out of this hole that they've dug for themselves? I mean, is it all Cade? Is it Cade needs to be healthy and Cade needs to pop and then everything else will come up?
Someone else needs to be doing the digging.
I was going to say, you can't trust this front office to put solid players there. Seth, you really are.
I mean, again, how many cups of coffee? So I am like,
can we get you to have that many more cups of coffee every time we're doing Nerd?
I think we found the new baseline. I want to swing to Charlotte and start with OKC though. So OKC picks up Gordon Hayward. So they make a good move. It's a great fit for them if he plays, if he can be healthy. He's got good size. They need some size, especially on the wing. They just need a bigger body. And Mo, I want to go to you first because you've been hollering all season. They need a big. They need some size. They didn't get it. Is this a failure at trade deadline day for them?
I mean, I think failure is probably a strong word, but they just didn't get done what they needed to get done. Like, listen, Gordon Hayward's fine if he plays. He's only played 25 games this year. He hasn't played more than 70 games since freaking 1982. I don't know, like 2019. But like, he rarely plays. He's very unreliable in terms of health and all that stuff. And the prime of Gordon Hayward, yeah, that is great. And I think we all love what that would have been. But I don't know if that's what you're getting there. And they don't necessarily even need that from him. But look, man, like I watched this team up close against the Clippers. They looked outmatched size-wise. I think when you're in a conference, when you got to go up against Denver, and yes, they're 1-3 they're 3-1 versus Denver this season. I still don't think that matters come playoff time. You up against the Lakers. The Lakers have beaten them twice already, and that's a really pretty bad team. I think you're up against so much size in the Western Conference. Like Chet can't do it all alone. In that sense, there were so many guys I wished, and maybe maybe the trades weren't there, but I wish they went after guys and they had enough assets there. I didn't feel like they needed to make a massive trade, but they needed to go get a big guy in that sense, a guy that can get rebounds for them, a guy that can help them board, help them defend a little bit more at the rim and kind of just help Chet out. So he doesn't have to do it all.
Just a quick aside. I think that there's been some research in the past that them being 3-1 versus the Nuggets, historically, that indicates a slightly higher percentage chance than if you just took the teams overall. Like I think it's probably gives them about a 2% higher chance of winning a series than you would just based on sort of who has home court and the team's overall resume. So it's not nothing, but it's not, as you say, it's not a massive deal. I think that a move that we liked for the team that made it was the Xavier Tillman pickup, and that like. OKC doing something like that. I think a guy who would have been really interesting for them. And speaking of teams that are not, kind of the opposite of Detroit, who's mashing buttons, a team that's kind of has unplugged the controller is the Bulls, and Andre Drummond would have been, I think, a really interesting, option.
Mo got me on the Jakob Poeltl train. And I think that could have been a really good pick. I mean, Mo just said that, and I was like, oh yeah, that fits. That actually is kind of right because he doesn't have to start. It still allows them to play their way. And Andrew, look, all year long, you've said the Thunder, they like who they are, they like their guys, they like how they play. And if they brought someone in, it needed to be maybe a Kelly Olynyk type that could fill that stretch roll, move the ball, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You still feel good about that?
I mean, they're at the top of the West right now. I mean, you have to feel pretty good about it. They've been really good, and they know. It's not like you ask the front office like, "Hey, what are you guys going to do about the rebound?" They know that the rebounding is a problem. The thing is, they were never going to deal for an Andre Drummond, Xavier Tillman type of guy. Like, they just never were. They want to play the way they play, and you have to be that kind of guy. And that's why Hayward makes sense for them, because like, he can shoot past dribble. He can play within the flow of their offense. That's what they wanted, more of that. And basically, they dealt away guys that weren't going to play in the playoffs, or a guy that could potentially play in the playoffs. Now, is this like a home run for them? I don't think it's a home run for them. I think it's a good trade for them, because they traded guys that weren't going to play plus a couple seconds to get a guy who could potentially fill a role for them. If he's hurt, would anybody be surprised? No one would be surprised. But they have guys that they still like there. Mostly what they wanted to do going into this year for the playoffs is to see what they have. They want to see what these guys are in the playoffs. This group has not been in a playoff game together yet. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been in the playoffs twice, but not as the main guy. And so what does that look like? How does Chet fare in the playoffs? What does this look like? They want to play 5 out. They want to just dribble drive people to death. That's what they want to do. If you put a big guy in the middle of that, honestly, we don't even know what it looks like, because they just have never even done it. And they don't want to do it. And so if you want a big man in Oklahoma City, make it a big man that can shoot, because that's what they want there. That's how they want to organize their offense. They don't want a traditional Clint Capella, Pirtle, rim running kind of big that's going to be in the paint. They just don't.
Yeah, I think that's short-sighted on a lot of levels, and I want to break it down on a couple ways, because it's this sense of I'm with you. They don't need to, everybody who was saying they needed to make a massive trade, I thought was out of their depth. They do need to see what these guys have, but also give yourself a chance to, hey man, maybe we can have a big run. You just said it. You're on top of the West, but we're going to use this playoff as an exploratory sort of situation. You don't know what's on the other side. You don't know what next season brings. You don't know where that stuff goes. When you have the chances, you go for it. I think the one thing that they're missing, and that I think that everybody in OKC is missing, is playoff versatility matters. And it's huge. You cannot play one way in the NBA playoffs. You can't. We've seen it too many times from guys, because this is what they're going to learn. Teams are going to lock down. They're going to figure out how they go. It's a big difference when you get to play a lot of teams on the second night of a back-to-back or whatnot, or, whatever. It's playoffs are so different in that environment. It's much more controlled, and teams get to scout a lot harder and a lot tougher. And you're right. They don't know what they have in these guys, but you're already on top of the West. It's a 3-way, almost 4-way tie by half a game for that. So you don't know where you're going to end up in that sense, but you're probably going to have home court advantage in the first round at the very least, if not more. Give yourself a chance. And again, you didn't have to make a massive haul in that sense. And if the idea is, hey, we're only looking at bigs who can shoot threes, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, because I think you need to have a rim runner. You think it makes a big difference. It also makes Shai's life a little bit easier. It also makes guys like Giddey's life a little bit easier. Jalen Williams' life easier when they come off the pick and roll and having a lob threat. It also sucks in the defense, and it kicks out to your shooters in all of those situations. There's a lot of things there. Just have an idea, and having one big won't clog the lane. Well, I promise you. I've done enough scouting. I've done it. I've done the homework. It won't clog the lanes where there'll be no driving lanes for Shai. I promise.
And also, it's a curveball, right? It's if you're playing smaller, stretch the floor faster, having a big that you can bring in, that you can trust. It's a curveball. It means that, when you go against the Denver Nuggets, you've got someone to throw at Jokic, because Chet is not going to be able to do that. And I don't think they've got a 4 like Gordon Hayward. If he's playing the 4, not going to be able to do it. So again, it's not about this season. I understand not giving up stuff, right?
Yeah,
but
they weren't going to give up anything, and they also weren't going to. They also don't deal with Jokic with one guy. It's always by committee, and that's how their paint defense has been for the last few years. It's all by committee. It's all double and scramble. It's the way that they do it. The way they defend too. I just don't think, and maybe they eventually will do this, is acquire somebody who plays different than they do. I don't think they were going to do that at this deadline. And I certainly don't think they were going to acquire a big who doesn't play the way that they play at this deadline.
I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think Mo was very astute in pointing out that, and you guys were both in that, you know, figuring out, okay, how does this style look? How does Shea look like as the dude in a playoff series? How does Chet like hold up to the physicality of the playoffs? That's valuable information. I think that some of the better moves we saw, like a lot of the better moves we saw, aside from the Knicks, were sort of kind of small ball, situational, put the club in the bag moves. And I think Boston made a couple of those. And I think that's much more what we're talking about than like send a first round pick. I mean, it's a team that's a wash in first and second round picks. What would it really have cost them if they had made the same offer that Boston did for Xavier Tillman, for example, just to have that club in the bag? To say, all right, Chet, we're going to give you 10 minutes tonight where you don't have to get banged on by Jokic in the post on defense every possession. Like just having that, I think, would have some value to them. And I do think that they are smart to like be a little bit circumspect because the Clippers and the Nuggets are right there at the top, know who they are. That's not going to be forever. Now they have an opportunity this year, but they have several years of opportunity. So I understand not like, well, if we backed up the truck, could we get Scotty Barnes or something like that?
Right. I also think they want to go the complete other direction that everybody thinks they should go. And they kind of have done this when they've played the Timberwolves, and it's worked sometimes and it hasn't worked other times. But instead of like a big spelling Chet, they just play Kenrich at the 5. And they like that look, and like statistically that look has been really good for them over the last 2 seasons. And so they would almost like rather just go the exact other way than what everybody thinks they should do. And I think there's just like a genuine curiosity of what happens when we do this. Does it? And maybe the answer is it doesn't work, you know? And I think that there's a distinct possibility that it won't. And honestly, if the Thunder don't win the championship, the inclination is this, that everybody's going to say the rebounding and the size is the problem. No matter what happens, that's going to be where people turn when the Thunder inevitably lose in the playoffs at some point this year. Like that's going to happen. And it may be right. It may be the right answer, but I'm just curious to see the way that it plays out.
I would just say, just look at Toronto trying to play last season without a center. I think we know the answer.
Yeah, and by the way, I will say this of the organizations that are doing experiments. I mean, I think OKC has probably like earned the right to be able to experiment a little bit without too much scrutiny. Not that we don't scrutinize it, but you know what I mean. It's just it's a longer term process, and they've made good decisions.
I just think they could have given themselves more of a chance without it actually affecting anything long term. And I think that was and you know it was a simple move. And if you didn't like the way it looked, don't play the guy. That's it.
I think that's totally fair. I think it's totally fair. I think the guy that I would have gone after, and it didn't cost a whole lot to get him, the Thunder actually ended up moving one of these picks anyways, was for Kelly Olynyk. Like if they were, instead of like trying to get involved in this Mavs deal, which I think they actually ended up in a really good spot with what they got in this trade. It's pretty absurd. And we'll go there. But I think you could have also, like, if you wanted to push in a little bit more this year, you could have flipped that pick for Olynyk, because obviously that's what it cost. You know, it cost them. It's that other pick, which nobody wants, apparently. It's been flipped like 5 times since last summer. But it finally ended up in Utah. But you could have gotten him. And I think he's the kind of guy he kind of is the intersection of all these things, like size. You know, he can shoot, he can pass, he can handle a little bit. He can do all these like little things that the Thunder want their big guys to do. But he ends up where all the Canadians go. So
that one doesn't make any sense. The other side of this trade, Charlotte, Seth, this was not a good trade for Charlotte.
It feels like negative value for an expiring contract. I mean, I guess give or take what you think of Trey Mann, as you know, with again one up for an extension starting next season with half a season to evaluate him, and then taking on money, like not a ton of money, but still taking on money next year from Bertans and it was Micic.
Yeah.
So like, we often say, well, it's better to get something for nothing than expiring. Sometimes you can get less than nothing, and from where I sit, it feels like they got negative value for moving off of Hayward's expiring.
I'm just on Charlotte.
Yeah, I
Like
think
I
it's
just
kind of the consensus.
like
Okay,
I don't know
well,
what else to say.
Let's use this as an opportunity to swing back to another trade involving the OKC Thunder and the Hornets and the Mavericks. PJ Washington goes to Dallas. And as a part of their trade for Daniel Gafford between the Mavs and the Wizards, this is complicated. Sorry, I'm trying to piece this together in my head. They roped OKC in. And what's the pick swap, Andrew? It was the 2028 first, the Mavericks 2028 first.
Yeah. So the Mavs don't have any other picks to trade. And so they can only trade swaps. And so they have traded what I think is an unprotected swap, because like the release doesn't say anything about a protection.
I don't know. I don't know if they can protect it because they have the 2029. Is that unprotected that went out, or do they still have that pick? I'm so confused.
I don't know.
I'm going to pull it up. Swap. They can protect the swap rights, but this means the net for Dallas. This means that they have the 2027, which could be the year after Luka forces a trade, top 2 protected swap going out, and the 2028 when Luka could have left in free agency the year before going out. Again, there might be protection on it that hasn't come out yet, but still, those are big chips to throw out there, given that it hasn't all been exactly smooth sailing, and there's new ownership in Dallas, and so who knows which way that cuts. So some risky second straight deadline of some riskiness from the Mavericks, I think we can say.
And for that, so they get Daniel Gafford from the Wizards, and they get PJ Washington from the Hornets. Grant Williams and Seth Curry going to Charlotte. Grant Williams had an awful season in Dallas. Just it has not been very good. He coming off the summer injury, came in out of shape. See if he can regain his form. But really, this trade, I mean, it's about Dallas. Dallas they're going all in with the rim running big. And I think PJ Washington, maybe we get to see him a little bit at the 5, a little bit of small ball 5, stretching the floor, running with Luka. How do you guys like this deal? I'll start with Mo.
I mean, I don't like all the stuff they gave up.
Yes.
The Grant Williams stuff and Seth Curry, fine. But like the pick stuff is a massive problem with all of that stuff. I kind of like PJ Washington, so I don't mind it. I'd like to see him in a more competitive environment, and let's see how he kind of does in that situation. I think Gafford has a lot of overlap with Derek Lively. I don't know if I'd necessarily would have went running for him in that sense, but like, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for them. I just think Dallas is in such a difficult position, and they're so afraid of pissing off Luka at this point that like they're kind of just trying to, all right, let's try to make these moves and hope it works. And hopefully PJ Washington's going to be good and on a good team. And we'll be able to kind of say like, look, we got some pieces around us, but it's going to be a little bit tough sledding for them. It's just kind of like it's like a C to me. Like I like the player, but like, man, I don't know what else it really brings to you.
I think that their moves always seem like they're half about tying up the loose end of the last move they made. And that's always kind of a tough place to be. I agree with Mo. PJ Washington has been a player that I've always been intrigued by. The idea of him as a 5 has always been much better than the actuality of him. He's a guy who can stretch the floor a little. He can rim protect a little. It's just it has never really actually been that good with him at the 5. And again, not exactly a prime environment for how this could possibly work out for most of his career in Charlotte, but it's not a slam dunk in those terms. Anxious to see this. I mean, he could be. I mean, I think you're hoping that he almost gives them what Maxi Kleber was about 3 years ago.
Yeah, just more consistent, right? Like,
Yeah.
and not scared to shoot, which
Yeah.
has been a Achilles heel for Maxey. Andrew Gafford would have been a pretty good guy. Like, in my opinion, he would have been a pretty good guy for OKC. You know, as far as if you were going to have a big who was maybe a spot.
Just because he's
guy or
tall?
whatever.
Is it because he's tall?
He's also a pretty good defender. Like, he protects the rim well. And this is where
Yeah.
Dallas, I think he helps them the most.
Yeah.
And him and PJ Washington can play together. This is a good pickup for them.
Yeah, I think I like
It's
Gafford.
a C, but it's good.
I think I like Gafford better than PJ Washington here in Dallas, just because I think he'll like that role is easy. Like, we've seen it work. We know what it looks like. It's going to be great. PJ Washington, I'm interested to see. He likes to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. And I just wonder what that looks like in Dallas, because you have
Well,
two
he won't
guys
have
that
the
are
ball in
going-
his hands.
That
Yeah,
won't even
yeah,
be
yeah.
an option. I don't think
I
he has to
know.
worry about
Well,
that.
and I'm
Yeah.
looking at the numbers. I mean, he's 34% catch and shoot, period,
It's not
this
great.
season.
Okay, but
30,
he's also
33, 33% 3-point. And I know he's going to get better looks
Yeah.
from Luka and Kyrie. I totally get that. I'm just saying, I want to see it before I feel good about PJ Washington in Dallas, because
That's
he's
fair.
not he hasn't played this style really. And because you talked about this earlier, Dave, like, there's not a style in Charlotte. And so putting him into like a style of play where it's like, hey, things are going to be pretty limited. Like, here are the things we need you to do. Like, we're going to put you in a box and you have to play in this role because this is the superstar, the guys who play next to the superstars in Dallas. This is how you have to play. And maybe he thrives in it. Maybe he catches fire from the corners and becomes a guy that can really help them. I also just wonder if he's like a tweener in the wrong way in this area. I think that it's hard for a guy that like really can't defend fives that well and maybe can't defend fours that well either to function in this league. I feel like he's kind of like he's kind of like a Morris twin, like a modern day Morris twin.
Watch out! Watch your back, dude.
Is what it sounded like you were describing is more of like a cut rate John Collins, and it's a similar thing. I think John Collins is a better, more established player, and I think that's
right. That's more athletic.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a little bit the box that John Collins has been in for a lot of his career as well.
I just think, again, there's also a nice little uptick when you go from Charlotte to Dallas. Like, there's going to be a little bit more, like, you think about the shots he is going to get, the opportunities in terms of when, he may not get to handle the ball as much, but his looks are going to be a lot more open, and if he can get that percentage up to 37%, I think we'd be like, damn, all right, this was good, and I think that helps them out a bunch. So it's going to be interesting. They'll see how it plays out, but it's also just a trade where it's like, cool. I don't think this makes Dallas any more different, in the playoffs than what they're going to be. Like, I don't see it as like, oh man, now Dallas is a problem. Like, I just don't see that.
Yeah.
I think to finish up on the Hornets guys, I mean, as Andrew's alluding to, that we've seen, guys suddenly playing real games again. Like, maybe we can almost call it the Boris Diaw effect, right? He looked very done. And so that applies, I think, both to PJ Washington and to Gordon Hayward as well. I think that there's a chance that, like, just, that's got to be one of that arena on a home night has got to be one of the most depressing places to go out. And I warmed up, and 60% of the fans are for the other team, and 30% of the fans are empty seats. And
the other Bank of America employees.
Yeah.
I mean, the only promise though is Brandon Miller. He's been really good for them.
He's been,
like, if you watched him lately, he's been really good.
Well,
and I think like that's their promise. Like I kind of wish they got rid of everybody. Like, literally just said, man, like, everybody gone. Like,
just sink the boat.
No, seriously, like, I kind of just wish they did. They and said, we're going to just focus, kind of what Toronto tried to do. Like, we're just going to focus on Brandon Miller. And that's our guy now. Like, because I think you see a lot there in that sense. Like, there's a chance for Charlotte. I just hope they figure that out.
Yeah. Let's swing back to the East, because some contenders made some moves. I want to start with Philly. Obviously, the Joel Embiid injury is the biggest thing lingering over that team. But they made a couple moves. They shipped Pat Beverly to Milwaukee for Cam Payne in a move that I don't really understand. But they also traded for Buddy Hield. Furkan Korkmaz out of town. They get Buddy Hield. And at full health, this team is going to score so many points. Buddy Hield might be the best shooter Joel Embiid's played with, like as far as
JJ
it's a
Redick
catch and
was
shoot
like a
guy.
word.
Oh, you know what? That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Somewhere JJ was like,
When you consider the volume and the shots that he takes, Hield's up there, man. Like he's a very good shooter. But I appreciate you reminding me of JJ. Man, but you see like the vision here. It makes so much sense to add that kind of shooting on the perimeter. Joel has to come back. Like, I mean, this is just this move. I mean, it doesn't matter for this season unless he comes back. My assumption is they're going to sign him this summer. Hield is a free agent this summer. My assumption is they'll bring him back, but none of it matters if Joel's not healthy.
I don't think they can operate any other way. You're trying to win a championship. All right. If he's not right, we're not winning a championship.
Right.
So let's zero, like that might affect how much you're willing to put in a trade in terms of like the equity of the bet. But in terms of the kinds of bets you're looking at, the upside is if Joel is healthy and so I think that's the only way to look at it. And they didn't really give up a ton. And some of the smaller moves they made, the moving Daniel House, moving Jaden Springer, and I think that the Beverly for campaign move is sort of signaling this is they've put themselves in the position they got enough under the apron to be able to sign, I think, 2 buyout guys. So I think that they think they're probably getting Kyle Lowry and somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. They cut Daniel House. Throw that out there. A little bit of housekeeping.
No, they traded him to Detroit. Who cut him?
Right.
Yeah.
Detroit just cutting a lot of people, man.
Yeah.
Just going. No, I like Buddy Hield for them. I think Dave, you alluded to it. Best shooter they've had since JJ Redick.
Since
and
JJ.
I think that and I think that's a good one. Another guy that can he can attack the closeout, put it on the floor a little bit, smart player, good movement guy, and kind of keep the stuff going there. And we all know, and Seth said it, you said it, man, if Joel Embiid comes back, great. If they're not winning anything if he doesn't. And I think they had to operate that way in that sense. I like what they're doing. I think them clearing 2 buyout spaces besides Kyle Lowry means they know one other guy that's getting bought out that they kind of want. And it's not that this league endorses tampering at all in any way, shape, or form, or that we have such a show named for that on our podcast network. But I'm sure there's been a couple of signals sent out, in terms of who's going to be out there. I mean, I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on and how they'll kind of improve it from there. And, campaign's not going to do much for them.
Well, and the thing about the buyout market that we should just reiterate is that the new CBA makes it very difficult for the top teams to be in the buyout market. So this is actually pretty smart move by Daryl Morey to get himself in a position to be able to pick up a couple of guys with less competition. Like this, are they the best team that has the ability to get a buyout? I mean, just off the top of your head, it feels like
Yes.
Yes.
Does Phoenix have that ability or no?
No,
they don't.
I don't believe so. No.
We'll have to see how it shakes out with all
with the
guys
trades and stuff
all
like
the guys
that.
they sent out in like the Roddy portion of the trades that they made. So maybe, but it's not clear yet.
I love the phrase "the Roddy portions of the trades."
Indiana here. Look, I understand that you have to make these moves based on the future and that they're likely to lose Buddy Hield for nothing. But they got worse. And it's a team that I don't know that they got a playoff run in them, but they definitely do. Like, I don't think they've got enough juice now to make a playoff run. Doug McDermott, who they picked up from the Spurs, that does not replace what Buddy Hield did. And again, I understand it. The NBA, you got to think longer term. But Andrew, I just hate to see a team that's been so good and fun kind of cut that a little short.
Yeah, I do too. They made the Siakam move, which felt like an all-in move, and then they made this move that was like, well, we're still all in, but only kind of. I don't love it because they're in position to be there at the 4-5. They dealt for McDermott to kind of like fill that void in the shooting role, but you're right. Like, he doesn't provide the same amount of shooting. Like, he's not going to shoot as many threes as Buddy did. And so I don't love it. I think that Buddy helped them kind of play their style because he would take so many threes and he did space the floor. So I'm with you. I think they got worse. I think it was a good, like, if we're just like praising people for asset management, like, okay, good job for asset management. But I don't love it for this season in particular.
I think that, I mean, we've talked about freeing up minutes, and I think Aaron Nesmith's been really good this year. Andrew Nemhard has given them some stuff. Getting more from Matherin is probably, or getting more of a look at Matherin is probably good too. But I think above all, it might signal that they, reading tea leaves here, might signal that they kind of are being cautious, maybe even pessimistic about Tyrese Halliburton's health the rest of the year. Because in much the same way that, like, you know, Philly's doing nothing without Embiid healthy, if like Hallie is so central to that team, I mean, he might be like on a Luka level with as integral to everything a team does for any team in the league. And you know, hamstrings are tricky, and so it might signal that this guy's a free agent. We're probably, you know, we don't want to push this guy this year because we don't want to turn this into a long-term thing. So that may be factored into their thinking as well.
Yeah, I'm not too. It's just like an for them in that situation. Like, I think they know their situation and know the injury situation better than anybody else. And it's not like them losing Buddy Hield doesn't, I think, make the difference for them. 4 or 5. I mean, they replaced it with McDermott, and you guys are right. He's not at that level or not. But I think them knowing their situation was probably them being more realistic. And, you know, that's I applaud a team for being realistic for once in the NBA.
Can I ask you guys about being realistic?
Sure.
Does Pat Beverly realistically help the Bucks defense enough to put them back into that, you know, top 2 in the East?
He's better than Campaign.
He's better than anybody they've had on their roster, like on the perimeter defensively. He's annoying. He's, you know, like, I think the amount he helps defensively is overstated to a degree and whatnot, but he does bring a little more tenacity, a little more toughness. Like, hey guys, like we laugh and we make fun of him all the time, but like, he was the fire for a dead Bulls team last year that made its way into the play-in tournament. Now, granted, maybe they should have sucked and again gotten rid of everything. But like, he can bring some juice to them and at least fire guys up to a degree. So I don't know if it moves them into a 1-2 spot or whatnot. I think it's okay. But like, this was a team that desperately needed to add at least something, at least somebody that somewhat cared defensively. And I think they got that in Pat Beverly, and he gets reunited with his long lost friend, Doc Rivers.
You mean 40 minutes of Jay Crowder isn't doing it for you, Mo?
Who?
Yeah, no, the backup point guard, those backup 1 minutes, with I don't think there were times in the past where they would sort of try to get away with like ball handling with Giannis and Middleton. And I think that especially as Middleton has aged and lost some athleticism, that's probably not tenable anymore. And like, the backup 1 minutes with Lillard out of the game have been so disastrous for them that, like, it's almost as much about filling that hole as it is about specifically what Beverly brings. We've heard a bunch about like who, like the kinds of players they're going after, like, you know, a Bruce Brown, a Chris Dunn, a Najee Marshall. Like, those all would have been better pickups, but at the end of the day, like, they were pretty limited in what they could offer, and they didn't give up. They didn't really give up much, and Pat Beverly's an upgrade and didn't cost them a whole ton going forward and makes them better. And they still are sort of going to rely on the fact that they defend just well enough, and Giannis and Dame is otherworldly on offense. And that's still their path to a title. So did they solve their problems? No. Did they kind of shore up a little?
Not much of a needle mover for you, Andrew?
No, but it's better than Campaign. I mean, if they're basically bringing Campaign, Pat Connaughton, AJ Green off the bench, which has been like kind of their rotation, Bobby Portis too when they're healthy, it's an upgrade. Is it enough of an upgrade for me to feel better about them in the playoffs? Yeah, I don't know, maybe a little bit. You know, it's going to be up to Lillard and Giannis at the end of the day with what happens, and if he can come in and just cause a little bit of havoc in a playoff game, great. but I'm thinking maybe 1 or 2 games that it's gonna be, oh man, Pat Bev was the difference. It's not like gonna be like for a full series.
Right. All right. And then finally, let's talk about Phoenix. Phoenix makes a couple moves. They pick up Royce O'Neal and David Roddy, who, going to play huge playoff minutes for them because they need as much help as they can get on the wing. And, the Yuta Watanabe winds up in Memphis, and they send out some picks. So for Phoenix, I mean, they've been looking much better since their guys got healthy and are playing together. Royce O'Neal makes a lot of sense for them. Good pickups.
I think you're making fun of and missed the big playoff body Roddy.
Oh, no, I'm not making fun of anything.
I think you're making
I know
fun
what the
of
playoffs
that.
are going to look like.
No, Royce O'Neal's a good pickup for them in what they needed and everything that they, again, just a guy that can spread the floor a little bit, can defend a little bit in all that sense. Like, here's the thing. Most of these trades throughout the entire trade deadline, none of them really moved the needle for me. Apart from the Knicks trade, but none of them really moved the needle where I'm like, whoa. I think smart teams shored up what they needed to do. I think other teams kind of added some stuff. Some teams were still kind of curious what the hell they're doing. And I think, for Phoenix, you just put them in the category of, look, they added something that they needed. I don't know how much that lifts them up into their into the stratosphere.
They gave up very little, right? I mean, and they got a guy who's going to play in the playoffs.
There's a little question of where O'Neal is in that category of players who certainly their defensive reputations probably linger a little too. I'm not saying he's a bad defender now, but I don't think he's the defender he was, from his time in Utah.
Neither were you.
Well, I mean, there's only so low you can sink. So I was already at rock bottom. So, but yeah, no. And then, Roddy, I just, quick stat on that. How many players who've played at least 1,000 minutes this year have a lower true shooting percentage than David Roddy?
Oh, no.
Man, he's just catching strays. The dude didn't ask to be traded, man. They traded him. Even my dog.
Well,
did.
wait till he. Two. Scoot Henderson, who's kind of got a mulligan given rookie point guard ball in his hands and hurt, and the other one is, and this is delicious to me, is Killian Hayes. So,
oh boy,
one last shot on the way out,
man.
Hey.
Like, I feel for
one more
Roddy
missed
now.
shot on the way out.
The
thing about Royce O'Neal,
Man.
he's like not a 3 and D. He's like a 2.7 and a lowercase d at this point in his career, right?
Yeah.
He'll hit the open ones. Royce O'Neal, Torrey Craig, light.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about their size on the wing because they is Devin Booker their biggest wing now?
he might still be their best defensive wing.
Yeah, I think that's the guy you have to throw at a guy.
I think I would agree with that.
Sure.
Yeah, but these guys are just smaller. Like they're all 6'5" and shorter, and O'Neal's a part of that group now. And they actually traded away the guys that were like their 6'9", 6'10" guys in this deal. Not that they were going to help. They're all, I know, they weren't going to help a lot. But I'm just saying that it's hard to win in this league when like the only big guys on your team are like the big guy. You know, it's if these guys are all 6'5" and shorter, I think that's really tough, especially if they get matched up with a team like the Clippers. I don't know. I think that's a tough deal for them.
I mean, that die was cast when they made the Beal trade.
Yeah, they put themselves in
Sure.
that spot.
I just wonder if and maybe they didn't have enough to get a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, but that's the kind of like wing that they could have used that had a little bit more size.
Yeah, but that goes to, I think, the Nets again asking price being way higher than it needed to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with a lot of teams. And I think that's also why a lot of teams didn't, like Washington, didn't have the fire sale we thought they were going to have.
Yeah,
right?
Atlanta.
I think they know there's going to be more opportunities in the offseason for these guys. And a lot of those guys are not free agents. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on some of them. But, I think that's the thing. I think that's part of the reason why the Lakers made the calculus that they made to stand pat. Hey, we can probably get better players in the offseason when we can trade more of our picks And I think that was a better opportunity for them. And I think that's why they went the route they did. And I think Phoenix just did what they could.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the teams that stood pat at the deadline. And we'll start with the Lakers just because you were just talking about them. They didn't make a move like they did last year that propelled them to the Western Conference Finals. The team is, I mean, it's obviously flawed. They're going to go down the stretch with D'Angelo Russell as, I guess, getting a good chunk of the point guard minutes. He's had a good few weeks, and they took him off the market. The Lakers, like, they can't get into the buyout market, so this is just who they are. I mean, is that good enough? Probably not, right? I mean, Mo made a face and was
no, it's not good.
Is there an hourglass emoji that has no sand in it?
Like,
this
there's no.
Yeah, I just don't know what they're doing.
No, it's not about that. Like, let's just be honest. Like, how much did you really think that DeJounte Murray would fix that stuff? Like, in all honesty, I actually think it was smart of them to not make the move. You know, I know everybody gets all tired with the Lakers star chasing and everything like that, but they're LA. That's what they do. And they read the floor, and I think they read it accurately. And believe me, you guys know, not a lot more things I love to do than crush the Lakers. And the fact that they read it and said, hey, we can probably add more assets to the trade value and get a better player than DeJounte Murray if we wait till the offseason. Why are we going to continue to throw good money on a bad team? And I think that's just a smart calculus that they made. I actually think it was a situation there where I don't think there's a trade out there that would lift them up the way there was last season. And I think that's the situation they found themselves in. And, you know, of course, D'Angelo Russell shot unbelievably well. I promise you, all of his powers are gone as soon as the clock hit 3 Eastern today. Like,
he was awful in Atlanta, though. I just want to point out he
Yeah.
was awful in Atlanta. Right when those trade rumors started coming out.
Terrible showcase, by the way. Terrible showcase. That's where he was trying to end. They were going to try to ship him off to Atlanta. Like,
it's the opposite of Simone Fontecchio. I mean, so, you know, they wait till the summer. LeBron's 40 next season. Like, the expectation that LeBron is going to be able to do this forever. I understand that we keep saying, oh, he can't do this forever. And he just does. But at what point do you just say, oh, okay, we just got to try now?
Just to clarify, by the way, the Lakers can play the buyout market, and so
they can. Okay,
we're already seeing that, like, they're a likely home for Spencer Dinwiddie, who's getting bought out who's going to get bought out by the Raptors because he's got like a games played bonus coming up that they would prefer to not pay. I mean, I think that's it's fine. They another point guard that people have always loved being in the locker room with, right alongside D'Angelo Russell. So we'll fit in perfectly.
But just one more point, sorry, on just the Lakers stuff to what you were
good.
saying, Dave, about, you know, he's going to be 40 next year. I go, yeah, that's the point. That's why they can't just trade a guy that's still going to require them to be so reliant on LeBron. Like, we don't have to kind of dance around it. They're going to try to make a run at Donovan Mitchell if he demands a trade. You know, it's putting themselves in those positions. They wouldn't be in those conversations if they trade for DeJounte Murray right now. And I think that's kind of the deal for them. And the trades they want to make are going to be able to save LeBron so he can play a little longer, or for them to be able to survive after LeBron. And I think that's the plan for them right there. So, you know, we can circle back to this if they don't do anything in the offseason, but I think that's the strategy for them. And I think it's actually a smart one.
Yeah. Andrew, the Warriors also didn't do anything. They have some pieces that they could have moved. Chris Paul's expiring contract. I think part of this is Atlanta decided it's fine to make the play in, and we can make the play in the East. And that threw a wrench in a lot of people's plans. How do you feel about, like, the Warriors? I mean, do they have a shot at getting into the play-in, you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they have a shot. And part of that's going to be just getting healthy for them. And hopefully they can get healthy after the All-Star break. And if they do, I think they can make a run at the play-in. But let's be honest, I don't think this team is doing any damage in the playoffs this year. And that's fine. They're just kind of they're at the end of their cycle. Like, this is just like the end of this run. And every team has to encounter this. And the Warriors, I mean, you can go a couple different ways. You can try to keep this alive and trade assets and trade players, or you can just try to, you know, kill this as gracefully as possible. And I just don't I just don't think there's like a ton of upside in them, like trading Kuminga, who's been pretty good. I don't think that. I don't think they were going to make a deal like with Chris Paul's expiring that was really going to matter. I really don't. So to me, it's fine to not do anything. I think they're like deadline acquisitions are just going to the hope of getting healthy for them, and then just like making a run, see if you can squeeze into the playoffs, and then maybe play Denver and give them a scare in round one. I think this is kind of where this is headed if everything kind of breaks right for them.
I'll say this. I think that the Kuminga stuff has been great. I was worried Kuminga was a showcase guy, Seth. I was thinking, oh, we're going to put him out there.
Sure.
He's young and we'll go and move him. But the truth is Kuminga is the future for them. This is the guy. I mean, I think this is the guy that next year has got to be second to Steph only as far as being featured. I mean, he has made a huge difference for Steph. Steph has been better the last couple of weeks that Kuminga has been on this run. They have a pretty good team. I think they're well coached. They're just small. This is a team that lacks athleticism and size, and you can't do both. Unlike OKC, who has great athletes, Warriors don't. They've got like two. And Wiggins is only sometimes great athlete because the motor just isn't there all the time. So, I mean, Seth, look, Steph Curry's still a tier 1 guy for you, right? You can't waste seasons for a tier 1 guy. You just can't do it.
I mean, it's I think Andrew said it, like, and we've talked about it, like, as my son shuts the door loudly, like that's the door. That's perfect punch. The door is shut. I mean, I think that it's not just it's Clay with all the injuries. It's Draymond no longer being that guy. It's Kevon Looney. No, like talking about them being small.
Mm-hmm.
Like Looney has been one of the more underrated bits of their kind of late dynasty renaissance has been how good Looney has been, and he's obviously just isn't that anymore either. And so I think that it's, you can say, well, you can't waste, but you've been on top for a decade and the cupboard is bare, and they haven't been great at developing and picking up young people, and there aren't moves to be made, and so it may be a waste, but they are not wasting because they didn't have, like, it's not like there were things they could have done that would have fixed this. Once you have, Clay making a max and Draymond make it, like, it's
and
you
James
don't
White.
have enough. Yeah. And Wiggins turning into a pumpkin and Kuminga being, has come on. But I think if they'd have had this Kuminga for all of the last 2 years, they'd be in a much different spot. And instead of it just being kind of a very good month of play from him.
Yeah, and part of having that Kuminga for the past 2 years would have been to, actually play him those past years and let him play through mistakes with all that things. But Dave said it, and I think it's, at the end of the day, we just look back at that James Wiseman pick, and that was kind of like the major blow to them in that situation and how these things played out. And Seth's right, though. Like, these are how runs end. They don't end gracefully. I was here.
Usually they're worse, right?
I saw the Kobe run end as Lakers are going to give him a statue later today. Like it ends poorly a lot of times. It's not a lot of teams get to ride off in the sunset and say like, all right, we're good. Everybody hangs on too long. And I think that's just where the Warriors are at right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good time to wrap up. You guys got any closing thoughts as we move on from another trade deadline?
You think I have more to say?
So we talked about there not being the big moves at the deadline. That's because the big moves happened with OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam and James Harden already. And so we've gotten the big in-season trades we would have gotten. They just happened earlier. And frankly, I think that represents wisdom on the part of teams to come to good deals before it's like you're up against the gun and then someone panics that they might be getting a bad deal and then everything falls apart. So I think that's the lesson we've seen probably the last 2 deadlines.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think like the contenders in the league just know that they're contenders and they are who they are. For the most part, teams that are like contenders don't make massive deals at the deadline. It's usually teams shuffling deck chairs behind them. And so we kind of saw the same thing this year. And likely the team that's going to win it all didn't do a whole lot here at the deadline. And so I think It's going to be interesting to see now that like all these deals are done. We're going to have some buyout guys that we're going to overrate here in the next week or so. But overall, I think this has been one of the more fun NBA seasons to watch, and because there are so many good NBA teams, and I'm just intrigued to see it just be about basketball moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty good rest of the year. I'm looking forward. The playoff race has just been getting started, but it feels intense already. And that's crazy for February. Maybe it was the in-season tournament and it carried us through. I don't know. But I like a boring deadline. And this was, it was okay. Not too exciting. Not too many big names move. Just some marginal stuff on the edges. That's going to do it for this week, folks. Thank you guys for tuning in. For Seth Partnow, Mo DeKeel, and Andrew Schlecht, I'm Dave DeFore, and this has been Nerder, She Wrote, on the Athletic NBA Show.